ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's live stream. We have a lot to talk about. You might be aware of one of the issues that we're going to talk about later on. This is the sort of Transvestite Headteacher and the books in the school library there. And Phil is here to talk about that in a little while. Welcome, Phil. Good to have you back.
Always wonderful to be here.
And you're in Inverness this evening.
Yes, I'm sitting in a hotel lobby in a room that is a little bit away from the chit chat and the music playing in the background. But I hope there are no disturbing background noises.
Yeah. So the main topic tonight, far and away the main topic, is talking about John Naples Campbell, and we're going to look at some of the books in the school library in Kinloch Burby High School in some detail, and it's quite shocking. But yeah, I mean, some of it is things that you just disagree with. Some of it are things that are just absolutely beyond the pale. Appalling. But before we go on to those, a few other issues just to touch on briefly. Where shall we start? Let's start with Phil Holden's great little video he made this week. Have you seen this? It's really good.
Scotland, each woman has on average just 1.28 children. To put that into perspective, if the world had this total fertility rate, then in the next generation, we would lose the combined populations of North and South America, the United Kingdom, Western Europe, Russia, Japan, Australia, and China. In just 1,200 years, humanity would be extinct.
That's pretty good.
Brilliant video.
Yeah, brilliant. There's so much. I'm not giving an opinion about climate change here in particular, but there's so much talk about climate change as being a potential catastrophe for humanity. But I think in terms of reducing carbon emissions, I almost like don't worry. There's going to be so few people in decades to come. It's going to
unfortunately. I think unfortunately, there are big parts of the environmentalist movement that would be quite happy with humanity going extinct. There is a real anti-human tendency within the environmental movement, and it's funny because they will come up with arguments like, "Oh, people will suffer under climate change," but then they actually want people to be gone. So I think it's very duplicitous.
Yeah. Right, keep the comments fired in. Welcome. There's some comments in already. In terms of a problem, I mean, we're not sure of problems at the moment, but for a medium-term problem for Scotland, for the UK, for Western nations, we are facing a catastrophe because the economy, the welfare system, the NHS, it all just falls to bits. It cannot function on these projections. And fertility rates are falling all over the world. So this idea that there's always going to be countries where we can just import masses of people, well, maybe for a while, but it's happening everywhere as well. Anyway, well done, Phil. It's a good video. And
to be honest, it's not fair to drain other countries from their drain other countries and their trained people and their young people. It's not fair on these countries either.
Yeah, but immigration tends to be rich people from poor countries moving to become, in many cases, poorer people in rich countries. So the poor people in the poor countries are actually even poorer than they were before because the rich people and their resources have left. But that's another issue. Right, glad to hear it, Bruce. Thank you very much. I'm sure you are too. We can't see you, but I'm sure you are too. Right, let's have a look through a few more issues. I made a video about this earlier on today, so I'll just touch on it very briefly. Phil, I don't think you've seen the story. So Miriam Cates, a socially conservative MP. I would say probably the best conservative MP. She's been quite outspoken on a lot of issues, not the whole range of issues, but like sex education in particular. She's been maybe the foremost campaigner in the Westminster Parliament. But the BBC published an article today, 2 days before the election, saying that it's come out, they're undercover, their investigators have found that she used to go to a church where someone claims that they did conversion therapy. And their evidence is, and the BBC report, one of the things is, the culture was that if someone was like homosexual, that they would hope that they moved out of that into alignment with biblical Christian teaching. That's the sort of church it was.
Shocking.
That's just the smoking gun. So there's really nothing to connect her to it, apart from that she was at this church, that an LGBT activist claims these things went on. But the thing is, his claiming went on. I mean, when I hear them, I just think, well, I'm not really concerned about it. Some of it's in language that maybe, might be quite disconcerting for some people. It's in terms of, deliverance and spirits or whatever. Different brands of Christians speak in different sort of language, believe different things about this. Deliverance and spirit. The Bible reports lots of cases of Jesus doing that. So if a church speaks in that language, I don't think there's any ground to say. Well, my main point is, it's obviously the BBC having a real try and make sure she doesn't get elected again.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise. I think she's probably doomed in any case. I think the polling in her constituency shows that Labour will take over. So, Miriam, if everyone wanted to move to Scotland, there's a warm welcome awaiting you in the Scottish family party.
Yeah.
You would enjoy it. You enjoy it much more. The one thing I would say about Miriam Cates responding to this article, she responded by saying, I don't know anything about this in the church. I don't support conversion therapy, which was a shame, because she knows what they mean by it, and she knows actually she does. She thinks it's fine. So I think
the problem is that we cannot have in-depth conversation where we clarify our positions anymore. Statements will be taken out of context, and look at what happened to, for example, Nigel Farage and the Russia comment. I think it was taken out of context, and the same thing would happen to her if she said anything but I disapprove of conversion therapy.
Yeah,
she probably should have said I oppose any coercive or abusive behaviors towards or in this area. Yeah. That would have been the better argument or the better comment.
I was thinking if she had have said, look, this is what I think, and then people would hear it for the first time and they'd probably think, actually, that makes sense. Well, if they get to hear it, because it might just be through the filter of the media, they wouldn't get to hear it. But then if one person says it, then the next person's safer, the next person's, but at the moment it's like that they all back away from it. So anyway, overall though, Miriam, we're on your side. BBC's out to make sure you don't get re-elected, and that's not good. Which novel's been the most accurate in its prophecy, 1984 or another? I would always go for Brave New World. Do you feel? Have you got a contender there?
I would say a mix of both.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good question, though. Good question. Right. I'll answer this one. Right, Kaz, that's an example of just making a sort of personal, silly, groundless sort of attack. I mean, that's a million miles away from proper, intelligent debate. That is. I mean, it's just a stupid comment.
Well, I would say a little bit. She also asked me if I went through conversion therapy, and I think it's a better question since I used to be in same-sex relationships. No, Catherine, I never went through conversion therapy. I figured out that it wasn't my way all by myself. Uh-huh. But I fully support. I sometimes help people. Sometimes same-sex attracted people contact me, call me, and ask me for my advice, and I tell them my story. But I'm very careful with what I advise them to do because I'm not a therapist. So I can just tell them my own experience.
You'd be classed as a conversion practice person under the new law for doing that. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Right, Vote Live, just a quick reminder that I think that's what will fill social media up tomorrow, just the final challenge to people. And the other parties, the main parties, including Reform, they're not pro-life parties. Some people, I think, are trying to sort of kid themselves that maybe sort of Reform is sort of somehow because they don't say anything. So, I mean, they're not. They're not. They're not a pro-life party. Right, quickly, this is an interesting thing. Fertility rate again. We've been talking about that quite a bit recently. I think the data's from America, but I'm sure the same would hold in Scotland. And what this is showing is fertility rate at different income levels. So it's showing households with the lowest income have plenty of kids above replacement level. Then when you get into the middle incomes, fewer kids. Then when you get to the very wealthy, suddenly they're having more kids than anyone else. And the conclusion they're drawing from that is that people on the middle incomes are feeling, well, but probably they're on middle incomes because both parents are working and their lifestyle, their mortgage, or whatever, it can't accommodate the cost of having more children. That's the theory, which I think is backing up the point that basically if you have a society where the assumption is, or the necessity is, that both parents work, then the result is you don't get many kids and your society's on the way out. So that was interesting. What, have we got another one? No, that's the end of those. That's the end of those. Right. One more. This is a conservative MSP. You need to know that before you start watching. Conservative. The Conservative Party in action in the Scottish Parliament. Think of this.
To the Coalition for Racial Equality and Rights, underemployment affects black and minority ethnic communities, with underemployment severely contributing to the growing proportion of families in work poverty. Therefore, I ask the Minister, what is the Scottish Government doing to ensure that high quality and secure work is made available for people from the black and minority ethnic backgrounds?
How about that then? That's the Conservatives.
Yeah, I saw some posts of her, and I went to her profile and checked, and she keeps highlighting her position as the first woman of color here and there. So she really caters towards identity politics, both in the area of gender and also in the area of race.
Yeah, I think when I listen to that, she's pointing out an issue of underemployment. If you want to tackle underemployment, fine, but why ever does race have to have anything to it? Even if 90% of the people underemployed happen to be black, say, still the issue is the same for everyone who's underemployed. So you try and tackle underemployment, and it helps everyone the same. But the idea that we're looking at a problem disproportionately it affects this group, so we've got to treat it as a gender issue, as a race issue, as a whatever issue. I mean, it's pretty destructive. The thing I was going to say about this is the Labour Party in their manifesto have got in a passage which is, I think, quite scary, and that is they're going to force companies, medium and larger companies, to publish their race pay gap. Now, Theresa May was talking about this a while ago as well, the Conservatives. So publish the race pay gap. So what currently happens with men and women is there might be a vacancy, and big companies will think, oh no, we've got to watch a gender pay gap. We better promote a woman this time. So blokes don't bother applying. We've got to get our stats in order. So it discriminates against men generally. And maybe in some businesses it discriminates against women. But this is also going to bring race into it. So there'll be some people who think, well, some people already think there's no point in me applying for this job. But this will be doubly the case. So the company will be thinking, oh, our race pay gap, it was a bit bigger than our competitors last year. What are we going to do about it? We've just got to promote some minority, well, not black, maybe we'll need to promote some black people, maybe we'll need to promote some Asian people, maybe the Asian people are earning more than the like white European people, and they're going to have to try and trying to compensate this by being unfair to individuals, and it's going to cause massive resentment, quite rightly. So how do you see this working out, Phil? Is this the recipe for racial harmony?
No, affirmative action, pushing for race quotas or gender quotas will only ever increase division and make things worse. The best thing that we can do is trying to be colorblind and just treating the person as a person, not looking at background, ethnicity. I think it's incredibly divisive and will lead to an increase in racism both on the white side and on the colored side.
Yeah. Oh no. Someone's seen through us, Phil. We've been rumbled.
Pardon?
Someone's seen through us. someone can see what we really mean. So, Sean Boyd, do you want to tell us what we really mean? So, by a dog whistle, we mean we're saying things that everyone knows what we mean, but we're not actually saying it. So, what reprehensible views do we hold that we're not actually saying, that we're covering up by saying employment, etc., should be colorblind? I'd be fascinated to hear about that. So, please do type away, Sean, and we can respond to those. But I think there's already a generation of young men who are feeling they're getting a raw deal. There's so many special things for women, special things for girls. They've had this all through education. There's special scholarships for women. Now they're in employment. There's special schemes, there's special promotion schemes for women, and they're getting pretty fed up with it. Yeah. And I think this is just going to add a whole other level to it. Right, Sean, come on. Sean, we're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to hearing the view that you've discerned, that you have divined, that we actually hold, that we're not stating. Maybe Sean's he's lost signal on his phone for a minute, but Sean, don't go away. Do type that in, and we'll bring that in and have a look at it. Right, let's move on to the main event tonight. Now, for those of you who haven't been following the story, John Naples Campbell, I'll put him on screen now. There's no sound. You can just watch him for a minute. John Naples Campbell is this gentleman here who cross-dresses, is like in his own home, it seems to be, and puts videos of himself on TikTok. And he's a drag performer. He is the head teacher at Kinloch Burvey High School. I've described him as a transvestite. He objects to that term, but as far as I can see from the dictionary definition, then that seems to be what he dressed up as a woman. So the dictionary definition seems to mean that he is a transvestite. He's also an LGBT activist. And so obviously we can be concerned about whether or not he uses the school as a medium to promote his values, but we mustn't jump to conclusions. We must base it on hard evidence. Oh, before we go to that, Sean, 95% of views are reprehensible, right? That wasn't the question, Sean. The question was, which reprehensible view did you infer from our conversation that we didn't actually state? So if you'd like to have another try at that question, we'd be very keen.
But it's really nice that there is a 5% chance that he will vote for us.
Yeah.
So since I made you aware of the books that are in the high school in Kinloch Burvey, and if I may, I would like to tell people how I became aware of them. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, 2 months ago, Netflix shot a TV show in our area, including in Kinloch Burvey, and we had to wait somewhere, and they made the school available for actors to wait, and my family, we were in that Netflix production, and that gave us the chance to actually sit in the school. Now, I was aware that Mr. Naples Campbell is a drag queen and that he is a LGBT rights activist, but I also heard that parents really like him, that a lot of the kids like him. He does a lot of like theater work with the kids and does dance performances, and apparently he's quite good at that. I don't have an opinion on that. I didn't know him personally. Now, when I walked into the school, I obviously looked around and tried to see if I could see rainbow flags and things like that. And when I walked in, there was absolutely nothing. And I was very positively surprised. And I thought there would be more. And then we walked to the canteen, and that's where it started. There were 3 very big rainbow flags, intersectional rainbow flags hanging from the ceiling, saying everyone is welcome here. I doubt that included us really, or our views, but I then continued. I walked around a little bit, and I've walked past the library, and I saw these books in the library, and some of them were very troubling. Now, I also have to say, on the hallway, I did meet Mr. Naples Campbell, and he knew who I was because he addressed me with my first name. He said, "Oh, hello, Philip. Do you want me to open the sensory room for your daughter?" So he was very nice, very friendly, and I have nothing against him. I have no problems with the man personally, and the problems that I'm addressing here is with the content in the school, not with any of the teachers, including him. I was in the school a few years ago, and I also looked at the library. And back then, most of the books that were advertised were books positively highlighting and pushing migration. So it was a lot of stories about children from war-torn countries that come to the UK. So normalizing migration, and a lot of books encouraging girls to go into STEM and into politics, and a woman as a prime minister, a woman as this. There was practically no book for boys. So that's why what I noticed a few years back. Now, when I went into the library this time, the library has thousands of books, and I'm sure most of these books are absolutely fine. But the question is, which books are actively advertised? There is one area where they promote books, and on this shelf is exactly where the head of the children would be, on eye height, were 3 books, all 3 of them about gender, transgenderism, and sexuality. One was the book that you did a very good video about. The book is called Queer, A Graphic History, which, by the way, is for the age 16 and over, and it's accessible for 10-year-olds. The other book that was there is What is Gender? How does it define us? And Other Big Questions. And the third book, unfortunately, I don't have because I couldn't find it for an affordable price on eBay, and I really didn't want to pay too much money for that. But the third book was called Transmogrify, 14 short stories about trans magic. Now, these are 14 short stories written by trans and non-binary people about wizards and witches who are trans and non-binary. Now, you can actually listen to the foreword of that book on YouTube. I don't know about the stories. The stories might be fine, but the foreword is very activist. And it really pushes a narrative. The others, I don't know what the stories are like. Other books so every book that was promoted there was political. On the one shelf, it was gender and sexuality political. The other books were about race. There's one book about Black history in the UK. And on that book, for example, in the corner is the communist revolutionary fist, and it pushes Black Lives Matter. Other books that were there were this one, Amazing Grace, and Happy in Our Skin. Now, I got to say that these 2 books are actually really nice. I would even recommend them, and I'm glad that I bought them. But the problem is, there were all the books for children were about non-white representation. And while these books are good, there's definitely an agenda of pushing minority issues. Other books were about neurodivergent people, so people with mental health issues or with autism and similar things. And one book pushed climate issues. So yeah, overall, the school is very, very political. You practically can't find anything there that isn't one way or the other political. Now, many of these things seem benign and absolutely fine. For example, I wouldn't have a problem with highlighting people with mental health issues. But if everything in the school is focused on minorities and people that face issues, then it's definitely pushing an agenda.
Yeah. Two things to say about the mental health issue. Someone emailed when you're candidating in the election, you get lots of emails from various campaigners. I had one from some sort of mental health campaigner, and they were saying mental health, as you're saying, it's been included in the identity politics political movement. So they were saying there is a mental health pay gap. So there's people with mental health problems tend to earn less than people without mental health problems. Now imagine trying to sort that one out. I mean, it's just crazy that anyone could think that that's a reasonable point to make. The other point I'd make is these books here, probably the majority of schools in Scotland, you'd find the same thing. I mean, the worst one we're going to look at in a minute, maybe that's unique, but I wouldn't be surprised though if this book that we're going to look at in more detail is very common across schools in Scotland. So it may be that we're picking up on these issues with John Naples Campbell's school. It's very possible that these identical books, identity displays, are across schools in general in Scotland. But do let us know if ever you're in a school library, have a look what you see.
I would like to say something about the book that we're looking at. So this book, Queer a Graphic History, I would recommend for people to read it, because it is actually almost like a roadmap of the destruction of our society, I would say, because it attacks everything that is a cornerstone of our society. And it does highlight that everything that is not normal is queer or promotes queerness. And since they want to promote queerness, mental health issues, even unhappiness and suicidal thoughts promotes queerness and is therefore positive. I'm glad I read this book because it's so shocking.
Yeah. So what we've got here, Phil took out some quotations from the book and a few images as well. A few photographs of what was in the book. So we're going to talk through some of this in some detail now, just to give you the impression, like a full understanding of this message. In my video, it was sort of shock tactics. I showed the worst, most shocking parts. But here, we're going to build up more of a picture of exactly what this philosophy is that's being presented in the school library to children in Scotland. So, right, let's go then. Go back to queer as a verb. We might queer normative knowledge, identities, and institutions by delegitimizing them. Phil, just before you comment on that, just to clarify, the word normative doesn't mean normal. Normative means what you ought to do. So normative knowledge is like moral knowledge or belief in what's best or what you ought to do. So they want to queer, if you like, moral values, identities, and institutions by delegitimizing them. Delegitimizing our society's moral values, identities, and institutions.
It actually goes beyond it. It actually also means everything that is perceived as normal has to be challenged and destroyed, including homosexuality. So the book says it is problematic when people identify as gay and lesbian, because that's not queer. That is subjecting themselves to a binary of straight and gay. So realistically speaking, they want to deconstruct and attack and destroy everything.
Yeah. I used to maybe think of queer. It was like a sort of light-hearted term for gay and lesbian, whatever. But it's queer theory is not at all. It's something entirely different.
I can say from my experience within the gay community that there was a queer movement, and the queer movement was very heavily influenced and very close to Antifa. So the queer movement was the political gay, lesbian, or the political sexual movement, which was, I have no problem with something like that existing. There was a lot of like art and weird stuff coming out of that, but it's very fringe, extremely fringe. And in the last 10 years, they have completely taken over the narrative.
Yeah. So the book says, suggest some ways in which you might think more queerly in everyday life. So that's like the homework for the children in the school. And how about that then? So that, remember, we're in the school library here. So that's a summary of what queer means as opposed to gay. So obviously a very aggressive, hostile, angry sort of ethos. Right, how about that? Queer theory is also about questioning identity. We could also question what's meant by normal. Many of the currently listed paraphilias, abnormal sexual desires, are very common, are practiced by people consensually, and are associated with psychological well-being. So why regard them as abnormal? What do you think of that?
Well, I wish I could show people the reality of what that means, because I mean, I was very deep in the fetish community, and I can give an example that is not too sexual for people, but there were people where there's a whole group where it's normal and fetishized to cut each other and drink each other's blood. And that was normalized. And a lot of things, I don't want to go too much into detail, but in the areas of, in these areas of the gay community, the most shocking things were normalized, and there was almost like a race to the bottom how perverted you could get. Now, there were friends of mine, and I still value these people that do these things, but these behaviors did not lead to emotional and mental well-being.
No, I mean, you just read that and just think that is just not true. So, but you see the philosophy here, the modern philosophy of sexuality is if there's consent, then it's okay. Consent is the sole element of sexual morality. So in schools, they have lesson after lesson about consent, as though that's the only thing that matters, but it's not. There are lots of other moral considerations as well in terms of sex, in addition to consent. But here, well, I'm just going to have to keep reminding you of this. This is in the school library. This is in the school library. So let's carry on.
Could I just answer a comment from Catherine Suki?
Yeah.
Yes, this one. So you've both basically said this has nothing to do with John, yet you've made it all about him. So for me, it's not about John. I haven't talked to him about this issue. I have seen a change in the library since he's there. I don't know if he exclusively pushed for that, but my problem is not with John, but it's with the content that is being pushed in the school, and he is the headmaster. So I would say he bears at least some or a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The content of the library is one issue. I would also say the idea of having a head teacher who's a role model, who cross-dresses and is open about that, I have got a problem with that in itself as well, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're just talking about these books. Right, the next section. Right, when researchers ask people to place themselves on a continuum of sexual attraction, at least a third generally falls somewhere between exclusively gay, lesbian, and exclusively straight. More research has found that a similar proportion of people experience themselves to some extent as the other gender, as both, or as neither. I suppose the first question there is, do you believe that?
No. In many of the books that are in the library, there are, I would say, completely false data that is being used without citation, of course, to push a narrative to normalize abnormalities, which is quite funny because queer shouldn't try to normalize things, but they're very clearly trying to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen research in Britain particularly with younger people, and maybe things are heading in that direction. But I think that's the product of the ethos that people are growing up in. Just reply to Anna. The fact that you called him a transvestite in the live stream title devalidates every single point you have to make here. Right. I've just been to Google transvestite, meaning a person who dresses in clothes primarily associated with the other sex, typically used of a man. I mean, that's the definition. I mean, it may not like that. It maybe wants to use a different word instead, but that is the definition of transvestite. So that is what he is.
He refers to himself as a drag artist. I'm very happy. I would say he's a drag artist. He has appeared at events where he did not perform in drag. But I would grant him the term drag artist. I don't have a problem with that now, but the term transvestite describes pretty much the same thing, with the only exception that the transvestite does not do it exclusively for performance reasons. But since he has appeared at events where he didn't perform, to my knowledge, there's an argument to be made that maybe he is in some capacity a transvestite. If that is your real problem, if the use of the word transvestite is your problem and not the use of these books in schools, then I think you have a problem.
Indeed. Right. Let's move on. Right, we've got an image coming. Right, so apologies for the glitchy motion of this, but right, here we go. Right, destabilizing. The taken for granting dominant understanding which assumes that heterosexuality is the normal or natural standard of sexuality and categorizes people in relation to this. Destabilizing the dominant understanding that heterosexuality is normal or natural. Right, what do you make of that? I mean, what it's trying to say is basically trying to bring up children in the context where, everything is up in the air. Everything is up in the air. That everyone's got to discover or form their own sexuality, or according to this book, it's even saying that don't have a sexuality, because that's old hat. It's just have relationships with whoever you like.
I would like to briefly also mention this book, because I think the two books work quite well together. The book that we are looking at just now, Queer, A Graphic History, is the academic book. This book, What is Gender, is the child-friendly version. And in this book, just like what you said, everything that is normal is being questioned. And there's a very, very strong focus on advertising, not identifying with how you were born. And at the end of the book, it very explicitly asks the question. So here on this page, it says, hopefully I've given you a lot to think about. This book might have you got thinking about your gender too. Some big questions you might be asking are, what is my gender? Have I experienced sexism? Am I attracted to boys, girls, neither, or both? Am I a feminist? These are all incredibly leading questions, and the book gives you the answers so that the child is practically was forced to say, yes, I am, because otherwise you're a bad person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So this book really picks up and feeds the children in a child-friendly way what the other book prescribes in a very academic way.
Yeah. Anna, we haven't claimed that John's inviting kids to drag shows. There is material online, though, of him performing to children. He's got a video on TikTok when he's dressed up as a woman doing a performance with quite young, very young children in the audience. So I don't think we're guilty of anything there. Right, let's move on. Right. Sandra Bem's research found that rigid adherence to masculine and feminine gender roles was not psychologically healthy, and there was actually better for people to be androgynous. I mean, I just think that is outrageous that message has been delivered to boys and girls in a school. It's basically saying to them, being a straightforward boy or a girl, that's not really great. What you can really do with what you should aim for is being some sort of confused in the middle somewhere. That's really what's best. That's what makes people psychologically healthy. I mean, it's just totally inverted truth. But the evidence is entirely the opposite of that.
Absolutely right. That's correct.
Bem also studied how children internalize social gender roles, demonstrating that these are learnt rather than innate. She argued that gender was not a useful way of categorizing people. We should move away from it. So again, it's not like saying you can be transgender. It's not saying men can become a woman. It's saying let's just do away with there being any such thing as men and women. So everyone can just make it up as they go along, and everything's just a total undifferentiated muddle. And that's where people are really going to find fulfillment and that they're going to flourish through their lives. Again, total inversion of reality. All the evidence is people who go down these roads, things generally do not work out well for them. But this is inviting children in a really harmful direction. Right, what have we got coming up next?
By the way, there are a couple of comments from people that are apparently from the area, from King Lochbervie. And later on, I don't know if you want to do it now or later on, we can respond to them.
Yeah, do you want to pick some out?
They were from, I think, from Catherine Suki. She said Philip, the flags were there before he started. So this would be either a teacher or a parent and somebody. And further up, the same person said, Philip, as far as I'm aware, he only ever met you at the school, so you don't know what events he does. As far as I'm aware, he's always been in drag when performing, either on stage or as a social artist. That is, it's a fair point. Now, the question is, a social artist, at what point is somebody transvestite? At one point is somebody a social artist? As I said, I'm absolutely okay with calling him a drag artist. I didn't call him a transvestite. My problem is with the content that is in the school, and my content, unfortunately, after looking at the books and in preparation for this evening, I looked up his Facebook profile again. And as a drag artist, he does say, I know it's tongue-in-cheek, but he does say that his show is designed to push the gay agenda and to indoctrinate young and old into glitter, 80s, and pumpkin spice lattes. And I think when people are already concerned about drag artists indoctrinating children potentially, and you are a head teacher, maybe you shouldn't make jokes about that. Also, he did do a Drag Queen Story Hour, and in the Drag Queen Story Hour, 2 of the books that he read were LGBT themed, and in the 3rd book, which I thought was overall okay, he talked about naked crayon that is hiding in the crayon box because it's very naked and it doesn't even wear underwear and it's so naked, and I want to wear some clothes again. Now, I don't have a problem with that book. I don't want to be overzealous, but you have to ask yourself, why are 2 of the books about LGBT content and the 3rd one talks about nudity? Again, it could be a coincidence, but if you are already questioned, if you are indoctrinating children, then maybe don't go out of your way and make jokes about it. I believe that the flags were in the school beforehand, and I don't know if he brought all these books in, but the books were in the section recently added. If, again, for me, it's not an attack against John, it's an attack against the books, and he carries the majority of responsibility in the school as headmaster. So if he doesn't agree with the books, if he doesn't agree with people calling out the books, then the books shouldn't be in the school. And if he wants to take it out with me or with parents that worry about it, so be it. I also want to say I've got 2 children. Before John started as a headmaster, my wife and I, we already talked about homeschooling our children. Then the position of the headmaster had to be filled. And I talked to my wife and I said, hey, depending on who the new headmaster is, maybe we can actually send our kids to school if the new headmaster agrees that the curriculum should be neutral, and if he doesn't push race politics or gender politics or feminism or something like that. If it's just focused on education, then I'm very happy to send our kids to school. And then I heard that a drag queen is the headmaster, which obviously did not convince me. And now the fact that the library is so political in every sense of the word, unfortunately forces me to not consider sending my kids to school. And you know very well that we barely have any children in our villages. And so a more neutral curriculum would benefit the school, I would say. Sorry for the,
no, thank
for
you.
the long monologue.
Is it true the report is Scots Farm Reports of Police? Yes. Originally, he said for a hate crime. He's now saying for harassment. So, but yes, he says he has reported us to the police. The other thing is John Naples Campbell did a drag performance in a primary school. He spoke about doing that. I remember it was on his Twitter. I made a video about it. He did a drag performance in a primary school. And I won't repeat the words, but there was also some reference to a sort of pretty obscene, an obscene reference as well, in terms of what he was going to wear or whatever. But we'll leave that there. So I think the defense is not really holding up there.
Oh, Catherine Suki just mentioned he didn't read the Crayon book. So it seems like you know him very well. Maybe we are talking to him actually in person. So maybe this is a pseudonym for him. Maybe that's another persona that John uses. Well, on the Facebook page, it did say that he read the Crayon book.
Yeah, it was on his Twitter that he talked about doing the performance in the primary school. I mean, Catherine, well, it's what are you playing at? You just seem to be sort of mouthing off. I mean, how would you possibly know? I mean, do you really think we sit here totally making things up like that? Anyway, let's carry on with the book. Deconstructing compulsory heterosexuality. Rich, who's some academic, pointed out that all the effort goes into enforcing compulsory heterosexuality reveals its precariousness and instability. If heterosexuality was just natural, it wouldn't need to work so hard to shore itself up. In other words, society manages to force people into being heterosexual. If society just let people choose, then we'd realize that heterosexuality wasn't natural at all, and the species wouldn't exist by now.
Can I say, if transsexuality and homosexuality was so normal, why does it have to be shored up so much? Why does it need to be pushed into people's faces? By the way, the book about queer theory says that according to queer beliefs, we are not born straight or gay. We are all born neutral, and it is the job of educators to queer children. So I disagree with that statement, but that is what queer theory stands for. So they say every child in school is per definition neutral, and the educators should queer them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, indoctrinate them. That should really make you question the intentions why these books are in the school.
Now that reminds me of the pioneer of LGBT education in England, Andrew, somebody, his name escapes me. Anyway, he talks about queering the primary classroom. So we can see what he meant by that. And just as a side issue, somebody that we know called out this, and this was a registered teacher, and the General Teaching Council of Scotland opened a case against them for criticising LGBT indoctrination in schools. And this case went on for 5 years. 5 years. And it was just announced very recently that the case had been closed. You know, that they were not taking any further action. That's the General Teaching Council of Scotland kept someone in that precarious situation for 5 years because they objected to someone who said they wanted to queer the primary classroom, the processes, the punishment. Right. The second quote there is a bit like the first one. Let's move on to the next section. I mean, words fail me. Do words fail you, Phil, or can you manage to say anything about that? Phil, yeah, have we got any comments to make about that? Or
yeah, so this this photo is used where it asks, can heterosexual people be queer as well? And the book says yes. Heterosexual people can be in bisexual relationships or can have group sex, or like in this case, a woman can penetrate her partner. So that is accessible again for 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Okay,
the thing I want to say there, just remember, this is in the school library. Now, John Naples Campbell, I've been in touch with him personally, and I'm going to say to him, you know, are you going to remove these books? That's the key question. If he says, oh, I didn't realize you like that, yeah, that's not suitable, I'm going to remove those, then okay. That's right. If he doesn't, no, I think a complaint to the General Teaching Council of Scotland could be, and to the council would be quite appropriate.
I'm so sorry that I respond so much to comments in the chat. But I think since there are like either parents or people from the community there, I think it's quite helpful. So Anna Grant, she said, he's the loveliest man ever. No clue how people can pick at him like this. And still, after you showed the photo of a woman penetrating a man, accessible for 10-year-old children, she says, nothing wrong with a bit of pegging. So, Anna, if you think that the depiction of women penetrating, I would love to use the vulgar language here for you. If you think there's nothing wrong with that being shown and promoted to children, I think you're probably a safety risk for children. Not saying that you yourself would do something to children, but I think you seem to fail to protect children from potential harmful material. Now, Catherine Suki says, and I think, Philip, if you actually spoke to him, you would like him. Your common interests in horror and Halloween in particular. As I said, he was very nice to me, and I have no problems with him personally. If he leaves children alone in regards to promoting sexual themes, in regards to pushing racial division, because my children are mixed race, and I don't want books that promote an anti-white narrative, like, for example, the book Being an Ally. If he gets rid of that stuff, if he promotes a school, an education system that is safe for my children to attend, then I wouldn't have a problem with him at all. I have so many gay, lesbian friends. Many of my customers are gay, lesbian, and I fully respect them. And I have no problem with John and his personal life choices, none whatsoever. My problem is exclusively the interaction with children and what is promoted to children in the school. So I want to make that very clear. And if John wants to come up and have a nice chat and a cup of tea, I'm very open to that. Same goes for you, Catherine, and also for you, Anna. I'm not a bigot. I don't have a problem with these people. But I care about what's being taught in school. And I have to say, I'm a Christian, a devout Christian, and I would not want Christianity to be pushed on children without the explicit wish and of the parents. I think schools should be free from indoctrination in every direction.
To respond to something where you're talking about, what we're saying is that really harmful, destructive indoctrination in school, to respond by saying someone's a nice person. I mean, is that really a relevant response? Anyway, how about this? Let's go on with the book. Straight privilege builds on the work of feminist and anti-racist activist Peggy McIntosh on male privilege and white privilege. McIntosh looks at how these privileges interlock to give straight white men advantages in life.
And I would like to add something from the book, Being an Ally, because it fits so nicely in the book. It says, that's taken out of the sentence, trying to fill the gaps in my knowledge left by a white supremacist education system. And further on, let me have a look. Beware, the agents that protect systemic racism in the real world may be operated by your sweet old neighbor who bakes you cookies, a beloved family member, or your closest friend.
Right. Yeah. Making exactly the point. It doesn't matter how civil someone appears. It doesn't affect your judgment on what they do. Just to answer this one as well, Catherine, this is an interesting question. You could have gone to the school privately, but done it publicly. Right. We're a political party. So when I respond to this as a political party, what I'm doing is saying this is a case of what's going on in schools in Scotland. This is a small part of the bigger picture, but the bigger picture is very concerning as well. So the fact that Highland Council is allowing this to take place, I want to raise this as part of a bigger picture of making parents aware of what's going on in schools. And then we present ourselves as a political party with policies that would stop it. So that's why it's a public approach.
I would also like to say to Catherine that if these books are okay, then nobody in the school, no teacher, no parent should be ashamed of these books being made public. So if you have nothing to hide, then it shouldn't be addressed in private. If you think that these books should not be addressed in public, then you agree that there's something seriously wrong with these books being in the school.
Yeah.
And by the way, I did the day before Richard created the first video, I did call the school and I did ask for an appointment with John, but I understand that was very, very short notice, and I do not blame him at all for not seeing me, and I was not clear that it was about these books. So yeah, yes, I could have talked to him in private, but I was dealing with these issues for several weeks, and Richard asked me, can I finally do the video about it? And I said, I talked to many parents, I didn't get very far. Yes, do the video.
Okay, next bit. How about this then? Now, again, Scottish Family Party policy. We're pro-marriage, want to promote marriage. We want to teach children to learn about the philosophy and benefits of marriage. But instead, this book does the opposite. Institutions like marriage should be questioned. Perhaps institutions like marriage should be questioned, not joined. So a straightforward anti-marriage message. That is just destructive of children's future prospects. It makes me really angry that children are turned against the very thing that's likely to be their best, the best route to a happy life for very many of them. I'm furious that is sitting in a library in a school in Scotland. Right, how about this then? So polynormativity and kink normativity, open non-monogamies have been suggested as potentially queerer and more ethical ways of relating than marriage and monogamy. So polynormativity? That's like saying you ought to have more than one sexual partner. Kink normativity, you ought to be into various fetishes or whatever. And non-monogamies, again, polyamorous relationships. So the suggestion is that they're queerer, which they certainly are according to this definition of queerness, and they're more ethical. In other words, they are more moral. That they are good things to do. Marriage to one person, well, that's not as good a thing to do. That's more of a bad thing. I mean, what can you say? Let's move on to the next section. Now, this was the bit you were referencing earlier. This is a very interesting passage. So she will be some academics that argue that happiness is a cultural imperative that directs us towards certain life choices and away from others. So it's as if she's saying here that the drive to be happy, this is just something that society imposes on us. And so the idea is like queer theory. So this idea that you want to be happy and aim for happiness, well, we need to disrupt that. We need to disagree with that. That's not really the way it is. It says happiness is promised to those who are willing to live their lives in the right way. Marriage, kids, home, career. She suggests that we require unhappy queers, feminist killjoys, and melancholic migrants to challenge this if we're to reach a more equal society where pleasure isn't always found at the expense of others or through conformity to problematic power hierarchies. I mean, how would you make sense of that? Does it make sense? Or?
Well, so there are a lot of mental health problems within the queer community. And obviously, if you tell people you shouldn't have a stable identity, you should constantly move in and out of identities, that leads to encourages mental health issues. People that are conservative leaning would point towards the mental health issues and say, it doesn't seem to make you happy. And a good argument against that is saying happiness is heteronormative. We shouldn't be expected to be happy. Happiness, like depression, is just as good as happiness. And by using these tactics, you're actually making sure that nobody can attack your movement, because no matter what your movement does, it's always positive towards the movement and negative towards the norm and heteronormativity.
Yeah. I just replied to Catherine, maybe it is, but that's nothing to do with me. I mean, I think the point here, it's just that earlier on we were saying these fetishes and whatever, they lead to psychological well-being. Then here it's saying, well, stuff psychological well-being doesn't matter. We need unhappy queers. So we need people to break all the rules, transgress all the boundaries, and be utterly miserable. But that's showing that there's a different path. We're not being forced into the mold of heteronormativity. It's quite. It's not even nihilistic. I mean, what is it? It's it's almost masochistic, isn't it? It's like almost acknowledging that these decisions are going to have bad outcomes, but let's celebrate it regardless.
So ever many years ago, and people that followed this channel and that heard me talking before know that I was a representative of the gay community when I was younger. And the reason why I became a representative of the fetish community was because I saw so much self-harm, drug use, depression, suicide, discrimination amongst LGBT people, that I actually wanted to be a voice within that lifestyle, saying, because the LGBT community did not call out drug abuse or mental health issues. They didn't say we have to look after each other. They normalized it, or they completely looked away. That's why I tried to say, we have to be nicer to each other. It's not good that so many in the LGBT community do take drugs and end up committing suicide. But that was not encouraged. The community itself, and that was before it was the queer community, there was a normalization of unhealthy behaviors, almost saying we can't criticize issues in our community because that might be used by the straight community when they criticize us.
Yeah, interesting. Right, same-sex marriage. This book is not keen on same-sex marriage. It says, many have written critically on same-sex marriage and its colonial, racist, classist, and sexist roots. There are much queerer ways to fight for the benefits same-sex marriage would confer. I mean, maybe people might be surprised to hear that. So the queer theorists, they're saying same-sex marriage, that's much too traditional. Instead of trying to get their bit of marriage, to get in on marriage, they want to just destroy marriage because it's a bad thing and just do away with it completely. And that's why the Scottish Parliament introduced civil partnerships for heterosexual couples. It was for heterosexual couples who think marriage is colonial, racist, classist, and sexist, so they don't want to get married. So the Scottish government has provided them with an alternative in civil partnerships. So non-monogamous have been suggested as potentially queer and more ethical ways. Oh, we've read that already. Yeah, we've covered those already. Right, let's get the got a picture coming up here.
I would like to respond to something that Anna Grant said. She disagreed with sexual books being in the school, but she said that political books, books about Black Lives Matter and similar issues should be in the school for political education, both books on the right and on the left. Now, I can, with all my heart, I can say there don't seem to be any conservative or right-leaning books that are promoting the opposing views. And I would say that in secondary school, political books that are controversial should, if at all, only be accessible, guided by a teacher who guides a conversation where both sides of the argument are being presented. If you just put political books into the library, especially if you only present one side of the argument, it is not education. In that case, it might be indoctrination, or it might be very dangerous because you give children access to topics that they might not understand fully.
I mean, this image here says illustrating a polyamorous relationship. You know, this is superior to monogamy and marriage or that sort of thing. Just a reminder, this is in the school library. Right, let's see what we've got next. Right, critical race theory acknowledges how racism is ingrained in societal systems, structures, rather than located in individuals. It analyzes how white privilege supremacy perpetuate the marginalization of people of color. I'm not sure we need to expand on that. We do just showing that this is in here. Right, now this next one. Homo nationalism. How gay rights and women's rights discourses are now used to support imperialist and racist agendas in relation to other culture, often ignoring the massive gender and sexual inequalities that remain within white minority world culture. Right, does that make any sense to you?
Yes, so this is in the book because there is a good argument to be made that gay rights in the West are very, very progressive, and that gay people have a lot of rights in the West, and that LGBT organizations and feminism should probably look at human rights violations in other countries, and that they should focus on that. But queer theory describes that as homo nationalism, saying, oh, you shouldn't intervene with other non-white countries. What they do is okay because they are marginalized, and you should only focus on the shortcomings of Western countries. So all these topics, just like the ones before with the happiness, I would say it's cope, because every time that you bring really good arguments against the arguments of these activists, they have to change the goalpost. And they have to say, oh, we can't criticize other countries because that would actually be racist, or in that case, homo nationalism. It's quite funny, actually.
I think it shows that the driving force underneath this is to be anti your own country, in order to stoke. Basically, it's like the extreme left-wing ideology to stoke the fires of revolution. Like, our country is so bad that what we've got to do is throw everything overboard and start again. We need revolution. It's just beyond redemption, and that's the underlying message.
I don't know. Did you look at? Will we briefly talk about Michel Foucault as well?
I don't think there's any quotes in, but okay. Fire away.
Because this book also promotes the founders of queer theory, and all the founders of queer theory, to my knowledge, were in favor of decriminalizing pedophilia. Most of all, Michel Foucault, who fought in France for reducing the age of consent to 12, and he himself was a pedophile and abused 12-year-old boys. And he is being promoted.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt there, Phil. He was a very nice man to talk to, apparently. Lovely man to have a cup of tea with. But
I'm sure he was.
Yeah, carry on.
Yes, and so the thought leaders of this movement all were in favor of the normalization of all sexualities, including bestiality and pedophilia. And you actually cannot have this movement without promoting the normalization of pedophilia, because it is the whole point of this movement is the normalization of everything that is perceived as not normal.
Yeah.
And we see that nowadays the left actually doesn't call it pedophilia anymore. It's called MAPS, minor attracted persons.
Yeah, we'll get onto that soon. The worst is still to come in this book. We're on to those bits soon. Women are blinded to their own oppression, as heterosexuality feels like a natural way of being or a positive choice, but actually it's an institution. I mean, that is just bonkers, isn't it? It's delusional, just gobbledygook. So basically, the idea is that the reason women are heterosexual is because society pressurizes them, oppresses them, tricks them, whatever, into being heterosexual. So they completely ignore the obvious about nature and reproduction and how the race works. They ignore that completely, and just the sociology, the wacky sociological theories win out. It's mad. That really is mad, I think.
One of the leading feminist thought leaders, she actually said that all heterosexual sex is rape.
Yes, I've heard that one. Yeah. Right. Let's. Right. We need to try and speed up a little bit. Let's just move on from those. Right, so we've got a diagram, an illustration here showing that it's basically the anything goes point. The things that some people might think are wrong or not natural or not normal or whatever, they're saying they're all fine, really. What's the problem? Right, so let 1,000 categories of gender, sex, gender, desire bloom. Through that proliferation, we can undo the privileged status of the two and only two categories that are currently treated as the normal and natural. So straightforward promotion of polyamory. So the idea, even at school, even if you've got a girlfriend, you just have one girlfriend at a time. They say, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. So striking at the very heart of natural family life, committed natural family life, which again, I mean, the more of this I read, the more wound up again. But that is evil. To be attacking goodness in that way to children in a school, that is an evil. That's a grave evil, and whoever's condoning this in the school will be held accountable for that. I mean, we've got all these sort of trendy terms. We don't really need to go into that.
Can I say, since I was in the gay community and I knew the queer community, if you scroll down again or up yes, exactly. So I'm well aware and familiar with all this stuff. And I think if adults want to do all that stuff. I don't think it's great for society, especially if it bleeds into the mainstream. But if consenting adults want to do this weird stuff, that's on them. But I completely reject any of this stuff being in school. And some people say, well, children will see that anyways. Children watch porn anyways. But if you say children will at one point drink alcohol anyways, that is no reason to give them alcohol in the school or introduce them to cigarettes. That the school has to be a safe space for children, and these books are not safe at all.
No, absolutely. Sort of with the comments, I've already blocked someone who was coming in trying to make sort of anti-Semitic points. Now, Quranic secularism's popped up on Twitter. I can't actually delete things on Twitter. But Quranic secularism, you are not welcome anywhere near the family party or anything to do with it. So we prefer if you just disappeared. But we can't actually do anything about that at the moment. So we don't have any kind of fixed, stable identity of what we are. It's all culturally constituted. Now, this is the interesting bit. Fat Studies. Fat Studies reframes the moral panic about obesity around the cultural production of fat phobia rather than fat bodies themselves. Authors such as those two examine how fatness is involved in dominant discourses around gender, sexuality, race, class, etc. Now, we talked earlier on how they keep taking things like mental health and bringing it into the identity politics philosophy. And this is another thing they're bringing in, like being overweight. What do you make of that?
The book also promotes the fetishization of disabilities. And obviously, I want disabled people to have a healthy and wholesome life, including sexuality. But the fetishization of disability is not helpful for anybody.
No. I mean, this moral panic. I mean, generally, as I hear it, the point about obesity is really unhealthy. It's expensive for the health service and it's not good for people. That's the issue. And it's starting with young people. So that's the issue. But they call that a moral panic. Like everything's seen through the lens of sociology and social constructs. It's like nothing's real. Everything's just a social construct. So that's the level you have to fight it. It's like the Scottish government's drug policy. They had a document produced and it says, the key issue is stigma. It's society's attitude. That's the real problem. It's not the actual poisons people are injecting into their arms. It's attitudes we need to sort out. Right, this next bit is one of the worst bits as well. That's quite small there. Just to explain. So we've got on the left there, we've got the boy watching porn on his computer. Mum is bursting in, saying, porn is dangerous, you'll get addicted. Right, Mum is the only sort of sensibly dressed person with like a normal hairstyle you've seen in the whole book, I think, so far. And then on the page next to it, the boy is saying, my current moral panics about online porn seen as bizarre in a century's time as anti-masturbation devices do today. Well, to answer the question, no. But would you like to expand on that?
Well, it is very clear that pornography and porn addiction is a massive problem, especially, very much so amongst young people. Even young men, teenagers already experience erectile dysfunction and can't have a very hard time having any form of intimate relationship with a real girl because they are used to pornography. And obviously, and even girls start watching a lot of porn, which creates completely unreasonable and unhealthy views of how sexuality should be, including the promotion of sexual practices that are painful and dangerous. So normalizing this, and I mean, I worked in that area, and I'm actually in favor of a ban for pornography because of how harmful it is. And I experienced it myself. I myself experienced porn addiction.
So, but the queer theorists have got an answer. Their answer, of course, is to say these dysfunctions and mental health problems and relational incapacity that's produced from it, their answer, of course, is to say, well, who's to say they're a problem? They're just differences, they're not problems. It's all part of life's rich pageant, and it's all part of human diversity. So the fact that it produces these, what anyone normally would say, this is something gone wrong, they say, well, this isn't something that's gone wrong. It's just everyone's different, and these are just different ways of being. So pornography is often regarded as a dangerous addiction, but they obviously disagree. Right, now here's the one. Critical sex therapists have pointed out that heteronormativity of existing categories of sexual dysfunctions. Right, I don't really want to get into the rest of that passage, but what it's basically saying, so if you say become a porn addict, and a person finds themselves unable to engage in a relationship with a real person, they're basically saying, who's to say that's a problem? It's just you're just different. You've developed in a different direction, and it's just society that says that direction is not so good. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just society makes you think there's something wrong with it, but there actually isn't. I mean, how do you argue with someone in this mindset?
That, by the way, is very similar to the normalization of depression that we talked about earlier, and the norm. So because if a lot of people experience, for example, erectile dysfunction in this community, then you can just say, who says that there is something wrong with the erectile dysfunction? Maybe that is just as good as not having erectile dysfunction. Because I can tell you from my experience back in the days, Viagra is consumed like popcorn in the gay community, because at one point normal stimuli are just not enough anymore.
This is just a hammer term. This is political. Heteronormativity is intrinsically linked with neoliberal capitalist notions, etc., etc. So it's all part of the sort of extreme left-wing political agenda. Right, we're getting towards the end here. We've done that bit. Let's just get to one of the worst bits that's coming up. Okay, we'll just keep going. Right, this was an interesting section. So the idea of this wheel is the things in the middle are the things that society says is acceptable, but the things in the outer section are things that queer theory says, this is, the forbidden fruit that actually shouldn't be forbidden. This is the sort of areas we should be exploring in order to be genuinely free. So you can see that everything in the middle, I would say, is a good. Everything in the black one is some sort of distortion or misapplication of sex, but that's what they are promoting. That's what we need to go to be free. But let's just speed up a little bit. Right, now this is an interesting one. We believe that all individuals, man or woman, black or white, gay or straight, deserve the same set of basic human rights. We may be born different, but we should be treated equally. And the book is saying that's like old-fashioned, that's like, boring, mainstream, traditionalist gay rights activists say that. But we don't want that. We're queer theorists. We want to go beyond that. And the bit I want to point out is when it says basic human rights in the middle. And you see the little arrow? And then it says it's human, non-human split is implied. So they're objecting that human rights only apply to humans. Now, this is in the context of like sexual rights, etc. So they're saying there shouldn't just be humans, there should be humans and non-humans. Okay, should be treated equally. Now, this is a book about sex and sexuality. So what does that seem to be hinting at? And that seems to be hinting at sexual relationships with animals in the school. But well, we don't need to go by hints. I'll be very interested, Catherine and is it Anna? I'll be very interested to your take on this next thing that's going to come up here. Do you think this is just fine? Right, here we go. Right, this is it. We might consider sexual orientation in relation to other dimensions, such as preferences for certain acts, certain zones or sensations, certain physical types, a certain frequency, certain symbolic investments, certain relations of age, like older and younger, right? I don't really like the sound of that. Or power. I don't like the sound of that either. That's like domination or whatever. That's not good. That's perversion.
Not just domination, but also, for example, teacher-student or boss, and employee.
Yeah, and symbolic investments as well. That makes me think, I might be wrong, the first thing that comes to mind there is like satanic ritual sex. What do you think it means, symbolic investments?
I was just wondering if that is money exchange. But I could be wrong. I did not understand that either. I tried to understand it. I don't know what it means. But the big part, obviously, is a certain species.
A certain species, yeah. So outright, point blank commendation of sex with animals in a book, in a library in Scotland. So Catherine and Anna, please tell us, are you happy with this? So Catherine, type away. Is this fine? John Naples Campbell is such a nice man. Do we think this is okay in the school library or not? I think not. That's just beyond the pale, isn't it?
So I want to say, again, I don't have a problem with Mr. Naples Campbell, and I do believe that I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I heard good things about like his dance class and things like that. And if he is willing to create a safe environment where I can send my children to, and where other parents feel safe to send their children to, where there is no sexual or racially and sexually divisive material, if he wants to do that, I'm 100% on board. If he wants to invite me to the school for a conversation and saying, let's sit down and say, what are potential issues? I'm very, very happy to help co-creating an environment that might be safer from a liberal and from a conservative point of view. I don't view him as an enemy, but I do view these books and a lot of things in the school as very problematic, and unfortunately too problematic for me to consider sending my kids to school in the future.
Okay, Catherine, this really is desperate stuff. Ask the author what they meant. Well, let's say the author meant something completely different. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely straightforward and unambiguous what the author meant. There's no room for maneuver at all about what the author meant. But let's say the author claimed that they actually meant something completely different. Still, the obvious meaning of this to the children in the school who might read it is as we have stated. So,
Catherine Suki says, Richard has a definite problem with John. You might not, Phil, but he does. That might be the case. I think it's okay for people to have a problem with people. I would be surprised if Mr. Naples Campbell doesn't have a problem with Richard, and I'm pretty sure that he has some kind words to say about Richard too. I'm okay with people having personal issues. I take myself out of it. I support both Richard's and Mr. Naples Campbell's right to have personal feelings towards other people.
Okay, that's we're almost there, people. We're almost there. We're right. So it's making the point that same-sex marriage was a bad thing, which we've talked about before. It's saying that the ideal world would be one in which there's no such thing as gay or straight. There's no such thing as coming out, because everyone's just everything. Everyone makes it up as they go along, and it's all fluid. I think there's a couple more pictures right at the end we'll just get to, and then we will wind up. All right, the pictures are not there. Never mind. Right, that's the end of our detailed look through. Right, thanks very much for watching. A lot of people watching tonight. Hopefully that's helpful. Phil, is there anything to add in conclusion?
Yes, I would encourage, since we have at least 2 people that know Mr. Naples Campbell personally, it seems, I would recommend for him to remove these books from school and to actively seek a conversation with the parents, to say there wasn't issues with certain books. These books have been removed. And he should invite parents to be active part of what is promoted in the schools and to create an environment that is more neutral. So I think that's the right thing to do. If he is a very nice man and if he is very reasonable, I would say that is not an unreasonable thing to expect. My children don't go to school yet, so it's not my fight, but I do think that parents should be aware of what is being taught in the school.
Yeah. Well, I think that's quite right. Obviously, GTCS had a case against me. John Naples Campbell, I thought he had a special role with the GTCS. He says he just got some sort of award from them. I'm not quite sure what it is, but he's got something on his X profile, the last time I checked, that said he's the General Teaching Council of Scotland, something or other. Either a role or an award or something or other, in any case. There's obviously something positive from them for this. And the last thing I was going to say, that last thing was saying, let's say John Naples Campbell said, "Oh, right, okay, this is a bit embarrassing. This is going to blow up on my face a bit. This might end up in the media. The council's told me I've got to get rid of these books, and it takes these books away." Would I be reassured? To be honest, I wouldn't. I think with what goes on in schools, you only see the tip of the iceberg. The most important things, it's informal conversations, it's assemblies, it's the whole ethos of the school. And what we tend to do is we'll just pick up on just things that are particularly explicit and obvious, come out into the open, and we'll focus on those as an indication of what's going on more widely. So if John Naples Campbell were to say, "Oh yeah, a couple of those books, we'll remove those," I wouldn't be particularly reassured, because ultimately this problem needs to be solved at the government level. But John Naples Campbell, what he's doing here is basically not too far off what the government wants him to do. He's enacting government policy. So as a family party, we think we need the government policy saying this cannot happen in schools. These are the sort of messages to be delivered. So my agenda is to protect children from corruption and to present them with a set of values that will enable them to flourish through the rest of their lives. That is my agenda. So,
unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave.
Yeah, me too. Right. Thanks. I'm actually going to do a live stream tomorrow night as well on election eve to remind everyone to vote for us. So, thanks very much for watching, everyone. I'm sure you must have found that interesting, or there wouldn't be hundreds and hundreds of people watching it right now. So, I'm
brilliant.
sure you found that interesting. Thanks very much, Phil.
Take care. Have a lovely evening. And
good
good luck to us in the election.
Yeah, thank you.